Finovate showcases cutting-edge banking and financial technology through a global conference series featuring short-form demos and thought leadership. Now, the conversation continues on the Finovate podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Finovate podcast. We are continuing our conversations with the FinovateFall Best of Show winners from the event that recently wrapped up in September. And joining me today, we have Neepa Patel, founder and CEO of Themis. Neepa, thank you so much for joining me and congratulations on your win.
Thank you. Finovate has been a great good luck charm for us. Not only did we win both times we presented, but we've also signed clients on site both times. So it's definitely been a very, very good experience for us.
Yeah, no, that's great. Love to hear that kind of thing. So before we get too far, let's start with kind of a high-level overview of your background and what Themis is all about.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. My name's Neepa. I'm the founder and CEO of Themis. What Themis is we built a compliance collaboration tool specifically designed for governance, risk, and compliance workflows. And so one of the reasons I built this tool, I decided to design it, was my personal frustrations in the industry with this. 20 years ago, 2005, I was a bank regulator. I then was a compliance officer at Morgan Stanley and Deutsche Bank, and I was also a compliance officer at a fintech. And so it was just my frustrations with compliance. I knew everybody had the same pain points. And so that's kind of how Themis was born. It is a modern tool to help you manage your compliance, but also to oversee external parties such as a bank that wants to partner with fintechs or a fintech that has multiple vendors. So there's a variety of use cases that you can use Themis for.
Yeah, and here's where I think I point to the demo again and say, check out the 7 minutes. You can actually find both of Neepa's demos. There's a 2022 version and the one from 2024, both available at finovate.com/videos. I think the big thing to call attention to here is, what's changed since 2022? Obviously, you came the first time, had a successful show, took 2 years off, and then came back and saw us again in 2024. What were you working on during that time? What's new this time around?
Yeah, so it was really funny. In 2022, we didn't really know what we were building. It was so early. The company had just started. We had design partners. And so we really didn't have product market fit at the time. And we were figuring out who our ICPs were and what was a pain point we were actually solving. There's so many pain points in compliance. And we were trying to see what sticks, what doesn't. And so when I came the first time, we were more focused on just, hey, plug and play compliance policies, and compliance regulations. And while we have all of that still in Themis, over the 2 years, we really nailed the product market fit there, where it wasn't really compliance that was the hard part. It was collaborating with external parties. And so since then, and from the most updated demo that we did at Finovate, we focused on collaboration, banks communicating with fintechs. How do you do the oversight? What types of reports would you show a regulator? And things that are just more current in the industry.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the things that we always love to see is companies like yours who are going back and coming initially and then saying, okay, what do we actually need to do? So what was kind of driving a lot of those changes? Was it customer feedback that you were getting? Is it kind of looking at the way the market is shifting? Look at how the compliance ecosystem is shifting. What do you think was really driving I don't want to call it a pivot, but some of those adjustments that you were making?
Yeah, it was a little bit of everything. I mean, if you look at the consent orders that came out in the last 2 years, they were all focused on oversight of third parties. Also, it's customer feedback. Luckily, almost all of our customers have been through a regulatory exam, and many have been through multiple regulatory exams. So we really know what the regulators are looking for, what they care about, what they don't care about. And the best part about this is Themis is actually a community-built tool. We listen to our customers. Our entire roadmap is built by the customers. We get constant feedback. And so that's kind of what was driving this. I don't know if it was really a pivot, but it was more of an expansion on more of the collaboration components of Themis. And then just talking to clients, that was the hardest part. They had no oversight. What's going on with my fintech partner? How many complaints do they have? They had no idea how much money they had in the bank. Do they have enough runway to survive in the next year? And so that's a lot of the ideas and capabilities that we put into Themis, oversight, more regulatory more regular oversight rather than a point of time.
Yeah, and I think this is where, certainly there's a lot to keep track of. And one of the themes that you brought to the demo, which you've already kind of touched on here, is that, it's not actually the compliance itself, which is the most difficult piece. It's the administration, it's the communication piece. It's making sure that, all of your external partners are doing the right things. Can you expand on that idea and talk about, where those big picture challenges come from?
Yeah, exactly, Greg. The problem was never, and even in 20 years of working at a bank, it wasn't that we didn't know a regulation existed or we were executing it wrong. Like that was never the problem. It was the administrative and operational burden with where is this document located? Who has it? Who owns it? It's outdated. Somebody left the company. Where's all their work? And it was a lot more administrative related than regulation related. And so that was specifically why Themis just works so well at banks, because we tripled down on a lot of the communication collaboration features, such as task management and chat and private chat and commenting. And then we created these safe private spaces to share material between multiple parties. And so it was those features in Themis that really were the game changer that customers love using. We have a bunch of policies and all the consumer regulations and OCC regulations built into the tool, but those are being used, but it's not the core feature of Themis that everybody wants.
Yeah, can you expand on a little bit and just give an example of what kind of communication we're talking about here? Because I think people who work in the regulatory space will probably have a really good idea of all of the sharing that needs to go on. But people who don't, like myself, is sometimes you think, well, how hard is it to communicate? What's the problem? Can't you just pick up the phone and call somebody, or or send them an email? Where do the challenges come from?
Yep. So there's two big challenges that we see. The first challenge is when you're a fintech, things are changing every single day. You might have a new product one day and then you decide to pivot 2 months later, and then you launch a new service or expand a service, or you need approval to do some type of exception. And so those items, those one-off things that you really need to get the attention of your bank, you could send an email, send it to like 30 people because you might need finance approval or you might need credit approval. So what Themis does is it gives you one portal. Any random question you have, any approval you need, it allows you to chat with your bank, and the banks get notification that your fintech needs something or they need approval for something. So we did help that streamline that. Before Themis, I think banks and fintechs were using exactly like phone or email, or some were using Monday.com, which was really never built for compliance or governance. So various different types of communication means where we streamlined everything in one tool. And it's also nice because a fintech can also come back and say, I sent you that a week ago, and I see that you looked at it, but you haven't approved it. So it does put a little more pressure on the banks, which is fine because they have to meet SLA requirements. So that was one thing we solved, is just getting each other's attention quicker than just sending an email out. And of course, we know things get lost in email. The second thing, which I think is a more prominent use case, is demonstrating to regulators that you are doing the right thing. I think a lot of the consent orders, when people read it, they're like, oh my God, that's so, like, how did the bank do that? Like, this is so dumb. Like, why did they do it? Why did they structure it that way? And it's easy to say that, but the one thing is, even if you're doing the right thing, you need to demonstrate to a regulator that you are doing the right thing through reports and through your actions. And so that's really what we also did with Themis. We create these reports that you can send your regulators. When regulators see Themis, they know that, okay, there is a tool they're using that's scalable. A lot of the processes built without Themis are not scalable. Excel spreadsheets are not scalable. Storing things in a drive, not scalable. And so that's something that regulators really look for. Do you have a scalable process? Let's say you go from one fintech partner to 50 fintech partners. Do you have the right tools and processes and staffing in place?
Yeah, and I think when you start to think about it from that standpoint, you think of, again, how complex this all is, but also in many cases how simple it can be. And here's where Themis really shines very brightly. One of the things which we definitely have to talk about is, obviously, in 2024 there were several very high profile, very large fines handed out by regulators. When you saw that happen, how did that kind of fit in with your the idea that this is largely an administrative problem, a communication problem? Did those kind of big fines reinforce, or did they challenge that assumption on your part?
Oh, it reinforced 100%. If you read these consent orders, it was all about oversight. And one of the things I saw was and I was a regulator, when you go into a bank and you ask for data, you want that data to be readily available. So, example, a bank says, all right, I want to see all the complaints of your fintech partner from last March. That stuff should be readily available for the bank. They should not have to go to somebody else or go to their fintech, and then the fintech takes days to put that information together. And so that's what I think was the regulators' frustration, saying a lot of the stuff was reactive rather than proactive. And so that was very helpful for knowing what to build for us, that, hey, these are things that they care about on a more periodic basis: complaint management, marketing, making sure that you approve all marketing material, that any random exceptions to policy are approved within a certain time frame. And so I think those those actually reinforce the need of Themis. And so the goal of Themis is also, like, I don't want any of our clients to get fined. And so this tool should help demonstrate and paint that picture to the regulator that we are doing things right. We know what's going on with our fintech partners, and we know when to exit a relationship. I think more than onboarding, it's also knowing when to get out of a relationship.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's a really crucial piece as well. Sometimes you do have to pull the plug on something if it's just not working. And I think so. What we did see this summer was, something that really, I think, sobered a lot of people up. It probably ended up driving a lot of traffic to your booth ultimately, because as it's become something that's top of people's mind. One question I have, as you look on the kind of the bank and the fintech side, obviously those two groups are embracing technology quite a bit to help deal with the compliance issue. Do you see regulators also adopting new technologies that is going to make their lives easier, or potentially make lives easier or harder for the financial brands that they have to regulate?
I really hope regulators are using technology. I know they're always slower to adopt, probably even after banks, but I do think they are using technology to help with examinations, for oversight, trend analysis. And now with this technology, I actually think it's very easy for regulators to expand their reach, not only looking at banks, but looking at material service providers they're using, and possibly even the fintechs. I wouldn't be surprised if regulators actually start um, looking at fintechs, and I think they've already fined a few fintechs already. When I was a regulator, I would be on site, and I had basically something that was like a repository, just writing all my notes out. And so I think it's, in the last 20 years, definitely technologies have helped regulators kind of pinpoint what's happening, and all the data that you're getting. You are constantly asking for documents and financial statements and complaints. And I think with now AI, regulators will be able to, like, synthesize this information much quicker, much faster, to actually identify where the real issues sit.
Yeah, I certainly hope that they're using technology as well on the compliance side, because I think, or sorry, on the regulator side, because I think that there's so many tools out there which can make life easier. And one of the things that I've seen, and again, I'm not an expert on the space, but from my perspective, the more that regulators are able to talk to the people that they regulate, the more there's this kind of open communication, the easier it is for everybody. It's easier for people to innovate when they feel like they really understand the rules that they need to play by. It's easier for banks to proceed with confidence if they can be really sure that they're doing what they need to do, not only to be compliant, but to demonstrate that compliance. This confidence is really key. And so that communication is absolutely essential. And there's an area for sure where technology can play a major role in facilitating that communication. So I think we have time for one more question here. And I'm going to ask you to make a bold prediction. Will there be more fines handed out in 2025 than there were in 2024, based on what you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I think likely more fines. I mean, maybe less if they're using Themis, which
Yeah.
I'm I mean, we're gonna. I think more and more people are learning about Themis, so hopefully less fines. But it really depends on kind of the bank's attitude and the culture. If the bank now, in the last 2 or 3 months, most of the banks that we're talking to, they're banks that don't have fintech partners. They're buying all the tools early on to prepare for this growth in fintech. Whereas before, and maybe a year ago, it was more banks that were already in the space and then buying a tool after the fact. So likely just more fines just because there's going to be more banks in the space. But I do think people are smarter. People are learning from past experiences. They are talking to each other, which leads me to this week, we're having a bankers-led forum where we're going to have 55 banks, all in the fintech space, talking to each other. So I think this type of communication, the space is small enough to actually know each other, or at least you know what banks are playing in the space. I think it's going to make it better, but I think in the near term, there will be more fines, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think we're in a moment right now where it's really crucial that the regulators need to sort of establish some lines, and so I think they're going to continue to do that. And so there's the question right now of making sure that you are not only in compliance, but again able to demonstrate that compliance. That they're not going to come and make an example out of you, which ultimately I think will be potentially good for the industry, but there will certainly be some painful moments in the short term. I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And again, I would encourage anybody listening to this to check out both of Neepa's Best of Show winning demos at finovate.com/video. Congratulations again on another successful FinovateFall go-around. And thank you for taking the time to connect with me.
Thank you. Thanks, Greg, for the opportunity.
The Finovate podcast is produced by Informa Connect in association with Provoke.fm Media. Check out Finovate.com for information on Finovate's upcoming shows and to learn how you can get involved. The discount code Finovate Podcast will save you 20% on tickets to all of our events. And you can email us at info@Finovate.com for information on sponsoring, speaking, or demoing. Thanks for listening.